So I got a question for you. Do you feel like sometimes your company or your manager is slowly trying to push you out the door, but just won't say it to your face? You might be experiencing something called quiet firing. And this is a term that's been bandied about, I don't know, for the last, say, 5 years. You heard quiet quitting, now you heard quiet firing, which quiet firing isn't on its face illegal. Is it shitty? 100%. But it could get to the point where it becomes what's legally known as a constructive discharge. And I'll get into what that means in a minute, but it could actually be illegal. Today in this video, I'm going to show you how to spot quiet firing or constructive discharge early, how to protect yourself, and what to do if you feel like you're being pushed out. So hey, welcome back. My name's Rob. And what exactly is quiet firing? Well, it's pretty simple. It happens when a company or a leader makes your job just so frustrating and demeaning that you just voluntarily quit and you just say, peace out, I gotta go. And it's often used for a couple of things, right? Either overtly or covertly, right? So it could be used to avoid paying unemployment benefits, because if you resign from a company, then the unemployment commission is going to look at that and saying you resigned and we're going to deny your claim. Now you could appeal and go through all the motions and everything, but the initial response from them may be that they deny it, or they don't want to pay severance, right? They don't want to offer you a package to give you some parting gifts as you go out the door. They'd rather just say, hey, if we treat Rob bad enough, he'll just go away. But here's the legal side. Again, like I said in the intro, is that illegal on its face? No. But if it gets to a point, and we're going to talk about this in a second, where it does cross a threshold where it could be illegal to do that, and your resignation then is considered a termination. So that's where it's known as constructive discharge. So first of all, let me give a disclaimer here. I am not an attorney. I am a recovering HR professional from corporate America for 27 years, but I am not an attorney. So if you feel anything that I've been talking about today or in other videos resonates with you and you think there's a problem, please consult an employment attorney and have a consultation with them to see what kind of legal standing you have. But let's get back to constructive discharge and kind of break down what that is. And it simply is, it's not that before we talked about quiet firing, we said, the workplace is made frustrating and demeaning, right, such that you quit. This takes it up a notch, right? This takes it, the whole resignation is a result of the workplace becoming so intolerable that you have no other choice but to resign. And it could be from harassment, unsafe conditions, pay cuts, being excluded, isolated, or micromanaged unfairly. All of these things could play into a constructive discharge situation. So here's the thing. And it's hard. If the burden of proof falls on the employee to say, yes, here's all the proof I've amassed to bring forward a claim of constructive discharge, right? And the court is going to look at this and apply what's called a reasonable person standard. The court will ask, would a reasonable person in the same situation feel forced to quit? I know that seems a little bit nebulous, because then of course the question is, well, who's a reasonable person? What standard are we using to define them? But be that as it may, the reasonable person standard exists. Now, there could be some legal repercussions, right? So if you've gone through all of this, right, you brought forth a claim of constructive discharge, you've got to show some proof. So you've got to have your documentation. I always say that in all my videos, right? The documentation that HR people love is a real thing. So document, show timelines, show impact, all of that type of stuff. But if proven, if you go through all of this, right, and the court says, yes, Rob, you were the victim of constructive discharge, you could be rewarded with back pay, damages, and again, it would legally be considered a termination, not quitting. But like I said, the burden of proof is on you. It's not on the employer. The employer is going to mount a defense, which again, they're going to put a hefty defense on. But you've got to show that the employer intentionally created these situations that resulted in you feeling you had no other recourse than to quit. The other thing you need to do, you can't just do this in a vacuum, say, oh, Rob, I heard this video on YouTube. Rob said that he gave me these situations and I've decided that I'm being a victim of constructive discharge and I'm going to sue. Well, it's not that easy. So you have to also show, and then this is where I said documentation, not only documenting what's happening, but you have to show that you went to management, to HR, and complained, and they actually did nothing to rectify the situation. The company is also on notice or also at risk if they should have known there's a problem, even absent any formal complaints. So even if you haven't complained, but say senior leadership actually witnessed you being mistreated, whatever the example is, that could also play into this as well. So there is a scenario where the company should have known there was a problem, but did nothing to rectify the situation. Okay, so let's talk about some red flags that you may be either quiet fired or the victim of constructive discharge. And they are going to look very similar to some of the other videos I've done on toxic bosses, which I'll link here on, here, the 7 signs that you may be, you may soon be fired, which I will link here as well. So take a look at those, but let's break these down from the standpoint of, are you being pushed out the door? So the first one is no raise or promotion, right? Now, again, you have to take this in context. So if you've been a subpar performer for quite some time, you haven't met your goals, whatever the case may be, that may be the reason or the rationale that you're not getting a raise for, your annual merit increase, or you're not getting that promotion because you haven't done your job. But if it comes out of the blue where you had been getting all of these, you've been getting good feedback, you've been getting good reviews, all of that type of stuff, and then suddenly you're not getting the raise, you're not getting the promotion, that could be a telltale sign that you're being pushed out. The next one is you're being denied PTO or paid time off, right? So you put in your vacation request and the answer is no. And you do it again, the answer is no. But other people are treated differently from you, where their vacation requests are granted. Now, again, context is key here, right? So if you're in a seniority-based position, right? So the first person to get their vacation request in is the first person it's granted to. That makes sense to me. But if for no other reason, suddenly you're not able to have your vacation request granted, that could be another sign you're being pushed out, because again, they're trying to make you as miserable as possible such that you will end up resigning. Okay, and again, and here's another thing, a lot of these things will happen out of the blue, right? So you're going along, then all of a sudden, out of the blue, here comes something else. And this next one is suddenly you're put on a PIP, right? You've gotten all these great evaluations and you've been a steady employee for a certain amount of time, then bam, expectations change and suddenly they're saying you're a poor performer, and for you to get back onto into our good graces, you have to then achieve what I'm putting on this PIP. So if it comes out of the blue, that could be another sign they're saying, you know what, we don't want you here any longer, and we're using this as a vehicle to push you out the door. And kind of a click down to the PIP is the workload changes. Either suddenly your desk is just piled high with stuff, or the opposite happens. Everything is just being siphoned away from you, so you don't have much to focus on, and you sit there 8 hours a day not doing anything. And again, they're trying to say, look, here's a writing on the wall. You should actually leave. That's what they're subliminally saying. Nobody will ever come out and say that. The other one too is, and this would probably happen more to somebody who's on, in type of a shift work, right? Suddenly your schedule changes again. You may have put in your availability and been working these set hours for X amount of time. And then suddenly you go from the morning shift to the night shift, right? With no explanation. It's just like, well, the business needs you here and blah, blah, blah. Again, that could totally throw your world into chaos. Let's be real, right? So that could also be another way to get you to resign. Hey, we've put you over here. It's our right to put our labor where we need it. Sure, company. But it also could be a way to get you to quit, because that doesn't work for you anymore. So you're going to go find a job where it does work for you. So that could definitely be a red flag for you. The next one is, and it goes back to what I said before, managers who avoid conflict. I should say bad managers, because suddenly your manager just isn't available for you anymore. They ghost you in meetings. They don't have one-on-ones with you. So if you've been having a great relationship with them and then something changes where they start ghosting you or, keeping you at an arm's distance, that could definitely be a sign they're just saying, hey, I don't support you anymore and I want you to leave. Again, they're not going to come out and say that. And then finally, this really could take place, more so on teams, right? Whereas before you were seen as a key component or a key team player on X, Y, or Z project, right? So suddenly here comes another project, you're now excluded from that. You're not put on that team. Again, context is key here because it could be a function of maybe you had some poor performance, so we're not going to give you something extra until you bring that performance back up. But if there doesn't, again, seem to be a reason for it, and I challenge you, you should be asking your manager these questions. Hey, why wasn't I put on this project? Blah, 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 whatever it is, right? But if there's no other rationale there, that could be just a very passive aggressive way to say, you know what, we're taking work away from you. We don't value your input here. So again, we want you to quit. So quiet firing is a total mind F, right? It can result in burnout, depression, anxiety, because all this stuff is going on and nobody's saying anything to you directly, right? So this is a very low trust environment. You don't trust your managers. They're not operating in a high trust environment anymore. So now you're left to wonder, is it me? And that could, again, like I said, it could result in depression, anxiety, feelings of isolation. And then you doubt yourself. You second guess yourself and the stuff that were once really seen as a high performer. And it is definitely just these mind games that these people will play with you. And if you start to feel this way, and again, you're looking at it very objectively, I say seek out if it's a therapist, a friend, a confidant who will tell you the truth and say, all of this is happening. I can't see my performance sliding. What do you think is going on? They may be able to give you that feedback that says, you know what? Yes, I do believe this is happening because they want you to quit. They want to downsize their team or whatever it is. And so that may help you get to that next stage where you start thinking about, I can't help this situation anymore. I can't control it. What I can control is me and how I respond to this. But at the end of the day, going back to it being a mind F, your mental health matters more than these games. So take care of yourself. It is not worth the anguish and the endless Sunday scaries. Raise your hand. Well, figuratively, I can't see you, of course. But tell me in the comments if you've had the Sunday scaries. Does anybody know what they are? Well, I'll tell you. I've had them where suddenly on a day like today, because it's Sunday at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would be having this overwhelming sense of dread because I don't want to go to work tomorrow. And it's not just getting up and going to work. I don't want to go in and deal with what is on my plate or on my desk. I don't want to deal with my boss or whatever it is because of the environment being so just dysfunctional and chaotic or whatever the case may be. So let me know if you've had the Sunday scaries and why in the comments below. And also, I'd be really honored at this point if you're liking this conversation and my other content, I would absolutely be honored if you would like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out and I'd appreciate it. Okay, so I saw on another video, and I promise I did kind of hijack these comments from another similar video, but they just jumped out to me as some people that offered their real stories in the comments, again, of this other video. One was this one woman was pushed down to 2 days a month. So her schedule, like we talked about before, is a red flag. Her schedule went from full-time to 2 days a month. And they wanted to, and she proved it because she won. She sued and won, but they wanted to avoid her pension payout. If you don't know what a pension is, it's kind of gone by the way of the dinosaurs. So Google it. The next one, this one actually blew my mind, and I would love to hear the whole story. But a star employee was put on a PIP, according to her, because she refused to not break the rules. You heard me, not break the rules. So her bosses wanted her to actually break the rules, and they would consider that high performance. So she wouldn't. She said, no, these are the rules, these are the policies, these are the laws, and I'm not that's a line I won't cross. I am not willing to break those. They put her on a PIP. And, she actually pushed back, and it looks like her managers ended up getting some adverse action taken again. Again, I really wanted to hear the whole story, but unfortunately it wasn't in the comments. And then I mentioned this before. Another person said that they were excluded so much suddenly out of the blue, their work was taken away, that they just basically sat in their office at their desk and stared at a screen for 8 hours a day because they literally had nothing to do. So that is isolating. And by the way, we all know that makes for a very long 8 hours. Those minutes turn into days. So again, I'm going to say it again, document everything. If you feel like you're in this situation, if you're being pushed out, write the emails, ask the questions, and put a timeline together. That is going to come in handy down the road. So what do you do if you find yourself in this situation? Well, there's a few things you can do, and I'm going to break it down right now. First of all, you can force their hand and actually make them fire you or lay you off. You can stay, do your job to the best of your ability like you have been all this time, and document every move. So collect those emails, document timelines. If there's a PIP, make sure you're documenting your performance as it relates to that PIP. And then, document again if there's any schedule changes, if there's any denial of PTO, all of that will come into play later. But force them to fire you instead of you actually just resigning, which is what they ultimately want. Now, I'm not going to lie, this option comes with a lot of, you have to have a lot of fortitude to actually go in every day and try and have high performance, because it can get very overwhelming and very dehumanizing over time. So the next one is the opposite of that. You can take control and actually do what they want. Just leave. But I would say let's click back from that for just 1 second. Make a plan to leave. Start applying for jobs. Don't wait now. Especially, you should always be applying for jobs, even if you're not looking. But in this case, if you're seeing these warning signs, start applying for those jobs and start making a plan to exit. Make sure your finances are in order. Maybe you want to start socking away some extra money, all of that type of stuff. And by doing those things, you're subtly taking back that control, right? So you'll feel more confident in your decisions rather than making a knee-jerk decision based on whatever situation is at hand. Update your resume, reconnect with old colleagues, all of that same stuff, but start it today, especially if you're seeing these red flags. And then lastly, I've alluded to this before. Again, I am not a lawyer. I would never have gotten through law school. I barely made it through school to be a pilot, and that's another story. But seek legal advice. If a lot of this stuff is resonating with you, or stuff you've seen in my other videos, which again, I'll link here, check them out. If that's resonating with you and you feel like you're being unfairly targeted, unfairly discriminated against, or if there's a harassment issue that is all conspiring, all these things are conspiring for you to quit, then go seek some legal advice and talk to a trained employment attorney. That is your best bet. See what they have to say and see if there's a go forward path. I would say also, be careful who you talk to, because a lot of these employees, they could be the ambulance chaser twice. So look at their reviews online, that type of stuff. And then also, if you have an employee assistance program through your organization, they may also have legal services as part of that plan. And here's the kicker. The company is blind to that. It's managed by a third party. So they would connect you with an attorney, and then anything you talk to with that attorney is under privilege. So it's not going to get back to your employer. So leverage that, especially if some attorneys may require a consultation fee, that type of stuff. So if you can get it through EAP, then it would be of no charge to you, and you could get some sound legal advice from that. Okay, so let me flip the script a little bit. I'm going to talk to the employers out there. So if you're a manager, or if you own your own company, or whatever it is, there's some things you can do to avoid any complaints of creating a quiet firing culture. First of all, is you should, as just a matter of practice, do regular anti-harassment training with especially your leaders, but preferably the entire population. So people know what is acceptable and what is inappropriate in the workplace when it comes to treatment of each other, especially if you're in a leadership role. So conduct that. That will actually clearly lay out what the expectations of the company are as it relates to culture and again, treatment of each other. Don't wait for somebody to complain. I mentioned this earlier, and I'm going to underline it, is if you're aware of something going on that's not cool, that could be harassment and stuff, and you're a leader, you are putting the company on notice because you're a leader. The company is on notice because you should have known there was a problem. You shouldn't have to wait for Becky to come in your office and complain that she's being sexually harassed or whatever the case may be. So if you're witnessing it and you're a leader in the company is on notice. Don't forget that. So you have to act. The next thing is also have clear and regular performance management systems so people are being treated fairly, are being assessed fairly, because again, that will stop the hard right turn of somebody who was once they thought they were a good employee and now suddenly they're being put on a PIP. If you have really structured and consistent performance evaluation systems, you'll take that wind out of their sails. Then the other thing too, you've got to encourage open door policies, and that could be a multitude of things, right? That could be literally the door's open, come talk to me. Or you may provide some alternative methods for people to voice their concerns where they feel that they are safe, right? So an anonymous, complaint hotline or whatever the case may be. But if you're providing those vehicles for employees to leverage, that's a good thing. Avoid favoritism, bias in scheduling. Make sure you're being equitable across if you're a team leader or if you're an organization, make sure you're treating everybody equitably to avoid these instances of favoritism and such. All right, so I'm back to you, the employee. So I'm going to say it again. Build your exit plan. It's one of those things, and I'm gonna keep saying it. What can you control, right? So you have to take the mindset at this point. It's like, look, I can't help you, boss. I can't help you, company, but I can help me. And then update your resume. Keep it updated so you're not doing this scramble all the time. Keep LinkedIn updated. Recruiters do look at LinkedIn profiles and reach out, from a cold call perspective to see if you're interested in. So it's always good to have your LinkedIn profile up to date. Here's a novel idea. I always said this, the best time to look for a job is when you don't need one. So maybe make it a practice of interviewing once a year. You may find, the grass isn't greener over here and I like my job. Or, wow, I didn't realize that the grass was greener and let me go over here, right? So it also keeps you up to date on interviewing so that when you do finally need, to interview, you're not doing it cold. You've actually done that before in recent memory. So maybe interview once a year or try some practice interviews. That could also help. I mentioned this before, and I think this is key to, again, helping yourself be confident in some of your decisions. And that's making sure you have a good nest egg, right? So if you're not good at savings, and that's not been one of my strong suits over the years. But if you're not, go start squirreling money away, right? So that it makes it easier to make a decision if things get really bad. You're like, you know what? I can actually go without a paycheck for a few, months or whatever it is until I get another job because I cannot tolerate this environment anymore. Always, always, always be expanding your network, right? Because networking is a key part of looking for a job. So always be expanding it. Always keep in touch with people. I've had people, who I considered friends and still do to some degree, maybe ones I wouldn't have to dinner, but I don't want them to die, right? But, making sure you're keeping up with people outside of just using them as a means to get another job. Keep in touch with them, keep that network active, and they'll feel valued so that when you do actually have to reach out for them and say, hey, you know what, I am in the job search, keep it on the down low, but I could use your help in networking. That's going to be better than, okay, I haven't talked to you in 5 years. Can you help me now get a job? If somebody's treating me that way, I'm not jumping on that horse. Know when it's time to walk, right? So first of all, if you're mentally and emotionally drained, the Sundays that are scary outnumber the ones that are actually pleasant. Also, if there's a shift in values, right? Because from you and the company, because that's what usually attracts us to certain employers, right? We're like, we see an alignment with what we feel personally and what's demonstrated in that company. So if suddenly those shift and suddenly you see a misalignment there, that could be a time for you to say, hey, this company has changed, so I'm going to have to go find something else. The other thing you need to look for is when no one will listen. So if you're actually mustering up the courage to go into somebody's office and voice your concerns and then nothing happens, there's a telltale signal that they don't value you anymore, and it's time to consider some other options. And then lastly, this is more of a secondary one, but if you're stagnant in your role and you're not getting those promotions, you're not learning and growing, that could be another time to walk, where a company that has a learning and development culture could be a better place for you if you're trying to accelerate your career. So you know what, at the end of the day, even if all this stuff is going on and it's bad, resignation could be the best career decision you've ever made. I'll just give one anecdote. I used to think I used to say this publicly in presentations. I have found the company I'm going to retire from. Famous last words, because shortly, a few years down the road, things have changed and I left, right? So be open to that. Be open to the fact that, hey, there's life out there. There's different experiences out there that could actually enrich me. And quite frankly, had I not left that organization and had all the other experiences I did, I wouldn't have had as a robust career and one that I'm wildly proud of as I did. So resignation, at the end of the day, was kind of one of the best career decisions I actually made. Okay, so once again, my name's Rob, and quiet firing, I'm going to just wrap this up. Quiet firing isn't just shady. It's a low trust dick move, in my humble opinion, if it's intentional. And it's also harmful to you. So you've got to protect yourself. Make sure, again, you're documenting, you're reflecting, and you're taking that control back. Again, you're going to feel more confident if you focus on what you can control in a situation. So tell me in the comments again, what kind of stories you're going through, what kind of stuff you've seen happen to others, and how you navigated it. And my hope is that you are not still in that environment, that you've moved on to a better environment that actually appreciates you as an asset that you are in the organization. So please, again, like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, and I'd be honored if you did so. And until next time, don't forget, you're not stuck and you're not powerless. So until next time, take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.